So, I have this thing. It's called a blog. I wrote a devotional recently, and as you will already see on my channel, I have created a video of what Romans 8:28 means to me. And this is related to this, but it's more focused on the topic than the verse, but it very much focuses on the verse. Anyway, I'm going to take the time and read this to you, and if you see me looking at the screen, I'm looking at my blog. Also, you should check out my blog. Put my link right there. So, Romans 8:28, Trials in this life. When you ask people what their favorite book of the Bible is, there are a variety of common answers. Over the past few years, one of the most popular answers that I have heard is the book of Romans. The book of Romans contains so many good nuggets of truth, as do all books of the Bible. It is known for containing pieces that can be put together to explain the truth of the gospel to the Western world. Many people have written sermons and devotionals on many of the verses and ideas that seem to pop off the page for every seasoned believer as they read this book. However, one of the most common verses talked about is Romans 8:28. Romans 8:28 reminds us believers that God is in control and he will work everything out for good. However, that is not all that can be learned from this one verse. In fact, that's not all that should be taken in the focus of this verse. In the ESV, the verse reads, "For God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose." Some of the key words for this passage seem to be ignored when this is talked about. It's not about how everything in our individual lives work out for good, but everything in God's eternal plan will work out for good. Capital G. God's understanding of good, which is way more powerful than we humans think is good for us here on earth. Not only is it important to understand that this passage is talking about what God considers good, but we need to understand that good is good for those who are called according to his purpose and those who love him. What does it mean to love God? This one is easier to answer as the Bible clearly gives us multiple examples. We need to love him with everything we have. Matthew 22, verse 37, by keeping his commandments, John 14:15, and by loving one another, 1 John 4, 7-11, just to name a few. What does it mean to be called according to his purpose? This is a little harder to answer. GotQuestions.org has a well-written answer that goes more into the detail about what the words called and purpose mean. But the important piece to understand is that called according to his purpose means that you are a child of God. To put the two ideas together, this means for this verse to even slightly apply, one must be a child of God and be seeking to walk in fellowship with him. I mean, do you think a good father would encourage a son or daughter to continue living in a way that pulls them away from the Father? Would a son or daughter be able to rightly come to the Father and ask for a blessing on a choice they're about to make or a financial situation that they have to deal with, knowing that it will push them away from the Father they are asking help with? That doesn't make logical sense, even for us fallible human beings. God is not going to help a son or daughter get a job if the job will not bring him glory. But he is not going to reject a son or daughter just because they're not walking in fellowship with him either. The good that will come out of this situation might not feel good to the child in the moment, but it will be good for the father in the span of eternity. So, we know that God works things for good, even if it doesn't make sense. We know that his definition of good might not be what we think it should look like. We know that he loves us and he wants us to love him too. Sounds like butterflies and rainbows, right? I can imagine that it doesn't feel that simple. There are still so many things that happen in life that hurt us. Even when a son or daughter of the King is walking in fellowship with him, that doesn't mean that their life will look perfect or even ideal. There is still pain, persecution, suffering, and hardship. What needs to be remembered during those times is the verses that took place just a few above. Many people will begin reading the book of Romans, specifically chapter 8, and they will glaze over the middle of that chapter, and then they'll focus on the end when it talks about this verse and what continues afterwards. But there is gold in the middle of the chapter as well. Romans 8:18, so just 10 verses earlier, says, "For I consider that the sufferings of the present time are not worth comparing to the glory that is to be revealed to us." Whatever we face on this side of heaven, even if it doesn't make sense to us, is incomparable to the glory that will be revealed to us. Everything hard that we face here is still hard, but it's not the end. There is still hope for those who are in Christ. This is not the end. So that's what I've written. There were some parts where I went a little off script, and I would love to be able to go more in detail on this topic or in some of the verses that I mentioned if you would like. But this was what I created, and it is definitely related to something that I've seen going on around me and that I can personally relate to as well right now. I feel like sometimes there are specific nuggets of truth in the Bible that get forgotten about when others start rising to the surface. So at some point, I think I'd like to put a video together with a list of biblical truths that are good to remember. Not like everything isn't good to remember, but just some solid truths that we can remind ourselves when our brain is full of lies. But this is one of them. Just that we know that God is in control, and what's good for him might not seem good to us, and that the trials of this time are incomparable to the glory that will be revealed to us in heaven. So, thanks for listening. Bye.